Hi guys, welcome to another video. Today I want to talk to you about climate change. Not only because it's a topic that's very close to me, but also because you see it more and more in the public debate, in the media. And most recently, Bill Gates joined the discussion with his new book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. So I want to start off with why climate change is important. And then secondly, I would want to go into Bill Gates' book and his approach on how to avoid this climate disaster. And thirdly, I would like to reflect a little bit on some topics he focuses on, but particularly some topics he doesn't focus on. To answer this question of why we should care about solving this climate change problem, I want to give you three reasons. The first one has to do with the temperature. Bill Gates in his book describes that if we don't change anything at all, we will have an increase of 5 degrees Celsius globally by the end of this century. Because I didn't know this, but 5 degrees difference in global average temperature is what caused the last ice age. But let's not only focus on the negative. There's an enormous opportunity we have in front of us here. And this is what I love about Bill Gates' book, is he focuses on the potential. Big electronic companies and pharmaceutical companies spend 10 and 13% respectively of their revenue on R&D. And in the energy sector, companies spend an average of 0.3% of their revenues on R&D. If we were to spend the same amount on R&D in the energy sector, we would have an enormous potential for innovation. And we would get so many more breakthroughs than we have right now. And this is one of the main arguments that Bill Gates makes as well. And I think it's a very good reason as of why we should focus on climate change. Because it's very exciting to focus on this new opportunity, this new potential of a cleaner world, a more equal world, and a healthier world. And last but not least, I think the title of Bill Gates' book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, has really two sides to it. First of all, if we don't do anything, we're gonna end up in a disaster. But if we decide to act now and innovate, we can truly create a sustainable and healthy society. So Bill Gates is an entrepreneur and he looks at numbers. So he starts the first sentence of his book with two numbers, 51 billion and 0. 51 billion being the amount of tons of CO2 emitted globally each year. 0 being the amount of CO2 we need to emit in 2050. And then he goes on to describe 4 main sectors of pollution. And he goes into each sector in detail of what kind of innovation we need per sector. And I believe it's a very structured approach and it's very helpful for the mind to get around such a complex problem and basically categorize it specifically so that we can start to begin to grasp the scale of what we are facing. So in his book, Bill Gates focuses on 4 main sectors of pollution. He talks about how we plug in, how we make things, how we grow things, and how we get around. And these 4 sectors have their own challenges, and he goes into each sector in a lot of detail. I'm not gonna go into all these details because then you might as well not buy his book. And in each area he focuses on the challenges and the obstacles we need to overcome and where we need more innovation, where we need more policy. And an overall theme that Bill Gates describes in all 4 sectors is the green premium. And the green premium is basically the amount we need to pay extra at the moment to get the green alternative instead of the non-sustainable alternative. And what he says is that as long as we can get over this green premium, we will get to 0 emissions. So we need to innovate, we need to make it cheaper, we need to make it competitive with the current products. Otherwise we won't get to 0. But we need to innovate in order to make sure that these green premiums are gone. Without these green premiums, we can start to really become a sustainable society. And how do we get rid of these green premiums? Bill Gates describes 3 things need to work together: policy, markets, and technology. So these 3 elements need to be coordinated simultaneously in order for us to overcome these green premiums. So I think it's a very structured book, and I highly recommend you read it. But there are some elements that I was surprised that he didn't focus on. And this is what I want to talk to you about next. And so next I want to talk about 3 things I think you should focus on when reading Bill Gates' book. The first one is when he talks about steel and cement. He goes into a lot of detail on how difficult it is to decarbonize the process of producing steel and cement. However, he doesn't spend any attention on the use of wood in construction of buildings and bridges and all these things. So I find this very interesting because the use of wood is a very sustainable source of constructing buildings. And rather than trying to decarbonize cement and concrete and the making of steel, why not use alternative materials that don't require any production of carbon at all? Bill Gates is a big proponent of industrial agriculture, and no wonder, because he is the biggest owner of agricultural land in the United States of America. And so what I want to point out is not that his intentions are bad, but that he compares industrial agriculture of a monoculture with non-industrial agriculture of monocultures. But he doesn't pay much attention to biodiverse and eco-friendly agriculture. And so what he compares is monocultures without fertilizers and industrial techniques versus monocultures with artificial fertilizer and industrial techniques. And of course, in this comparison, there's going to be an increase. But I don't think you should compare monocultures with monocultures plus techniques. I think you should compare polyculture, organic farming, with monoculture, industrial farming. And last but not least, his enthusiasm for nuclear energy. I'm a proponent of nuclear energy because it's the only energy source that we can use 24/7 on any continent in the world right now. However, I would be wary to use it as a complete substitution of current energy sources, because there's still one major disadvantage with nuclear energy, and that's nuclear waste. We don't know how to treat nuclear waste properly yet. And if we start relying for 100% on nuclear energy, we get a humongous amount of nuclear waste with which we don't know what to do, which will stay radioactive for hundreds of thousands of years to come. So without a proper solution of dealing with this waste, I would be very careful with the use of nuclear energy. So these are the 3 things that I wanted to point out that Bill Gates doesn't seem to pay much attention to in his book. And I'm really interested to see the reason behind this. I think it's a very useful book to get an understanding of the challenge we face right now. And I want to end with some tips that he gives on how to talk about climate change intelligently. He says there is 5 questions that you can ask, or 5 points, I should say, that you should keep in mind when talking about climate change. First, convert tons of emissions as part of a percentage of the total emissions. Second, we need to find solutions for all activities that emissions come from. Thirdly, always think, is it kilowatt hour, gigawatt hour, and how big is the scale? Kilowatt hour, think home. Gigawatt hour, think city. Fourth thing to keep in mind, how much space are you going to need? And fifth, keep in mind the green premium. Ask yourself, are they low enough for middle income countries to pay? These are the 5 tips of Bill Gates. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.